I'm Lisa Marie Anderson. I'm in the German department here at Hunter, and I'm really pleased to be one of the co-chairs of the subcommittee working on this. And now my other co-chair is going to introduce himself to you.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Lima from the Department of Africana, Puerto Rican, and Latino Studies. I'm a scholar of Latinx literary and cultural history, and I'm excited to be in this committee for lots of different reasons, not only because it overlaps with my work and the communities whose work I represent, but also to be working with just a phenomenal group of people. And I just want to say thank you, Julie, for giving us the opportunity to do this and bring more voices and opportunities for discussion on board. So thank you. Abby?
Hi, everyone. I'm Abby Morales. I'm of the Medical Laboratory Sciences Department, and I was a member of the Presidential Task Force to Advance Racial Equity. So I'm thrilled to still be included in this initiative in its next steps. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to our presentation.
And Gina Riley, School of Education, Special Education. So happy to be here.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I want to mention that I see Jeannie Weiler is also here. And as you're going to see on a slide in a minute, Jeannie is also part of the subcommittee working on this effort. And I also want to give a special shout out to Anthony Brown, who is here and was one of the co-chairs of that curricular enhancements committee. And we're really pleased to be continuing his and others' work. So apologies to anybody I'm missing, but I think I have recognized those of you who have been most involved so far. Laz, do you have the slides ready to share?
I do. So everyone should see that right now.
Great. All right. Thanks. So you've probably already gotten a sense that this subcommittee, the Pluralism and Diversity Subcommittee, is made up of a few different groups. Laz and myself are chairing it. We also sit on the General Education Requirements Committee, to whom the subcommittee will bring a proposal, right? The subcommittee will bring a proposal to the GER committee. The GER committee will bring a proposal to the Senate. As you can see here, Associate Provost Nikki Bennett is also serving ex officio on our subcommittee. Nadine Bryce and Sandy Clarkson sit on the subcommittee as well as the GER committee. Janet Neary, along with Abby, from whom you already heard, and Calvin Smiley are on the subcommittee representing the Presidential Task Force on Racial Equity's curricular enhancements group. It was really important to us, since our charge came largely from that group, that we keep members of that group on the subcommittee and that this be a Senate subcommittee, but one that is working broadly with a number of different constituencies. So let's see, Rupal Oza is, could we go back, Laz? I'm sorry. I want to make sure everybody gets their due. Rupal Oza is part of our subcommittee. So is Gina Riley, who already introduced herself and is one of our co-presenters today. Gina also chairs the Senate's Assessment Committee, and we knew that it was going to be important for us to be in conversation with the Assessment Committee throughout this process. And I mentioned Jeannie. Jeannie, thanks for being here today. Thanks for being on the subcommittee. Another Senate committee that we knew we would have to work with closely is the Undergraduate Course of Study Committee that approves undergraduate curriculum at Hunter. So we really put the subcommittee together in a deliberate way to bring together the work we're building on from the Presidential Task Force and those different Senate constituencies that we're going to need to make this a success. So that's who we are. And I want to just continue from there with the next slide, Laz, please, saying just a couple of words about our charge, what it is that our subcommittee has been charged with doing. What the Presidential Task Force put forward to the community was a recommendation to reconfigure and revise Hunter's 4 existing pluralism and diversity categories so as to expand upon and bring nuance to their late 20th century concerns and understandings. And they gave us really 3 pillars or principles to work with: structural inequality, social justice, and inclusive epistemologies as things that we would want to emphasize in our revision. So as has been mentioned, we have already had town hall style conversations and workshops last semester. We see today's event in some ways as a continuation of that. We are working not only to update the P&D categories, and we'll have a preview for you in just a moment, but also to think about process, to think about the certification, recertification process for courses that will fulfill P&D. And as I said before, this is a place where we see our subcommittee in consultation with other important committees and offices. And then finally, our charge is to work with all of you, schools, departments, programs, to make sure that Hunter students will have a robust list of courses with which to fulfill the categories. So this is the work that's very much in progress and continues today. Laz, you want to take us to the next slide?
I do. Bear with me here. Overview of. Thank you, Lisa. And I just wanted to do a quick refresher so that we understand where we're starting from in terms of the current P&D categories as they exist. And I'd also like to remind everybody that these categories have been in place for over 30 years now. And we are really in a moment where we should have revised these many moons ago, perhaps. I think the usual cycle for accreditation is 5, 8, 10 years or something like that. So more broadly speaking, we're really due for this. We're due for a revision that allows us to figure out how to best keep in step with student needs and also the knowledge transmission that is characteristic of a liberal arts institution such as ours. So just to give you a quick background, 30 years ago, the operative categories that appear here were generally derived from geographical location and forms of identity that reflect geographical space, time concerns, beginning with non-European societies that, for example, in category A also included Latin America. And one can imagine that if one includes Latin America in that context, one might also include the United States, because Latin America is fundamentally colonized by European powers, Spanish and Portuguese, to say the least. So even those categories, as they operated then, had their own particular valence. So Latin America might have meant something very specific to those who were comprising this. When we move on to category B, we see the traditional groups that are usually associated with forms of redress in US historical culture and the need to engage with those histories, what today we might call simply decolonizing the curriculum. That is, to make the curriculum reflective of the very groups and institutions and histories that have brought us here to this moment in time. Also, category C is significant here, where we see that trans issues may not necessarily be reflected, although the category is ample enough for that. And curiously, in pluralism and diversity, we had a category D, which also frames these concerns relating to pluralism, diversity, cultural participation of social outgroups within a European context. So that's just a little bit of background for all of you to sort of reflect on where we were and the direction that we are moving toward. With that said, and before introducing the current categories that frame the draft proposal that we'll be sharing with you, I'd like to, if you bear with me, also share with you some process questions that are related to the categories that you're going to see. So I'm going to do the stop sharing for that and do a reshare for a page on the Senate website that speaks to this specifically. So what you should be seeing, and pardon me if I scroll too quickly, I don't mean to make anybody dizzy. What we see here from the Hunter College Senate site is the subcommittee on pluralism and diversity and our work. So what we have here are a series of documents as well as brief descriptions of all the activities that have been undertaken since that curriculum enhancement subcommittee presentation to GER in April 29th, 2022, which seems like 100 years ago, but it really isn't that long ago. Let's see if I can pull it up on the same screen share. Apparently I can't. Once you go to the Senate site, you're going to be able to click on a series of documents that are reflective of both PowerPoint presentations, as well as survey data, as well as topics, conversations, documents that were used in workshops for this revision process. So it's a document-rich, I think, repository of our collective work together that has brought us to this particular moment where we can share in this sort of soft landing with you what these new categories might be through these process questions. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit to give you a sense of some of the work that's been undertaken with largely the help of so many colleagues from so many departments when we had that initial town hall in the Senate presentation. And if we move forward, some of these are slides that you might have already seen at this moment, but a particular pride point is a video that Lisa and I created that we asked that it be shared with department chairs so that we could have a baseline for us to have these conversations. I don't know how many people got a chance to see it. If you haven't looked at it, don't bother, because I don't want to be remembered for anything that's included that was there. We had some technical difficulties and we had to retape the video on a couple of occasions, but we do it with lots of love and stamina. So that's just giving you a sense. It moves forward to the survey, and I just read a note in the chat a little while ago about how far it reached, and we can talk about that during the Q&A. But for now, I just want to highlight the fact that we've also been meeting with student groups. We've met with USG, we've talked to various student constituencies on a formal basis, and we continue to do so. So I'm meeting with them on the 20th when they meet again so that we can discuss some of these process questions that I'm sharing with you right now, and also to get their feedback and to also ensure that they are poised to communicate to their own constituencies what the conversation has been like and how it will affect them moving forward in terms of the categories. Now, moving forward, you can probably see my cursor, at least I hope. What I'm circling right now, thanks for the nods, what I'm circling right now would be the starting point for other activities that we might have moving forward, including today's activity, which is also part of that particular narrative. So I'm going to stop the share, and there's a whole bar over me and I can't see anything. Stop share. Okay, here we go. And I am now going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation and share with you both, and Lisa's going to help here with the preamble as well as the proposed categories. So one moment.
So Laz, as you pull that up, let me say a couple things. First of all, a word of thanks to the Senate office staff, especially Lara Miranda, for helping us get that new page up on the Senate website. We recognize that people are coming in and out of this discussion at different times for various reasons, and we really wanted it to be easy for those who, let's say, weren't at the Senate town hall in October or weren't able to come to the December workshop, or to go back to a comment in the chat, didn't receive the message from somebody in their unit. We wanted there to be different ways for people to come into and out of the conversation. And to that end, Donna, I do hope that we will be able to share today's presentation recording either on that website or in some other way. That is our goal. I'll reiterate what Julie said before, which is that we're going to stop recording before the Q&A and discussion. But our goal has always been to share as much information as we can in as many forms as we can with as many people as we can. So before we go to the proposed categories, we really did want to share with you today the preamble that our subcommittee has written together. And it's a little too small on my slide, on my screen right now for me to read. I don't know about other folks. Oh, thank you, Les. That's wonderful. So I hate reading to people off of slides, but I think this language is important. It's language that we've worked on together as a subcommittee because we think it's important that this revision be historically situated, also be forward-looking, and explain some of the priorities of the revision. So bear with me as I read a little bit, but I really do want this to be something that we reflect on together. So Hunter's pluralism and full screen is, oh, right. Hunter's pluralism and diversity requirement was initially established in 1993 to expose undergraduates, and I'm quoting here from the establishing document, to a wide range of intellectual traditions, perspectives, and concerns arising from all corners of the globe, end quote. After the killing of George Floyd in May 2020, widespread global protests highlighted conversations about race, anti-Blackness, and the need to address systemic racism through structural change, including on our campus and in our curricula. We see this revision of the pluralism and diversity requirement as one such change, one that can redress systemic injustice while also accommodating future revisions attuned to evidence-based reasoning and ethical knowledge production. So I hope you see what I mean about us wanting to be historically situated and also forward-looking. At the same time, I'm thinking about those of you who were at the October town hall might recall Calvin Smiley's very, well, they've stayed with me. They've certainly stayed with me very strongly, comments about how he hopes it won't take us 30 years to look at these again once we've possibly passed something. Second paragraph, consistent with Hunter's mission as a public liberal arts institution, we seek to develop the skills and knowledge necessary for civically minded students to understand and analyze the structures of power that diminish or advance justice. We understand justice to mean not just the absence of discrimination and inequity, but also the presence of deliberate systems to achieve and sustain racial and social equity. Our aim is to inspire students to break down the barriers to equity and justice through a transformative educational experience that prepares them to succeed and thrive on our campus and in the world. And at least some of you may recognize some of that language as coming from the Racial Equity Task Force. Some of it has come from our P&D subcommittee, but we really did want to share that with you as a framing for the proposed categories that I think are on the next slide. Les, are you going to take this one or you want me to?
I'm happy to help here with these proposed categories. So one way to envision this is to consider, if you will, that the categories themselves might be something akin to a book title, and that the brief description underneath is a little blurb describing the direction where that book and its potential chapters are going to go. So apologies for my metaphor. I still am a lit professor at heart. The primary category here at hand is residency, citizenship, and human rights in the US. Again, we're moving away from geographically based notions of identity and having an understanding of the importance of what globalization has created in terms of, again, category B, migration, diaspora, and globalization, as well as the importance of situating, as we have, I think, in category C, the question of intersectionality and social justice as overlapping concerns from various constituents in democratic systems and even in non-democratic systems. And from that, I think it was important for us to keep knowledge production centered regarding epistemologies, environments, and technologies, and how that affects the way that we produce, create, and understand knowledge. That said, I do want to highlight, and I'm sure Lisa can elaborate a little bit on this, is that these categories are not really coming from us, but rather the input that we have received from various constituencies about how to understand and frame these concerns in a way that, as Lisa mentioned, sort of quoting Calvin Smiley, that this will allow us to be malleable enough so as to be nimble and able to be both responsive of future trends that might be emerging, and also just be cognizant of the fact that really 30 years is way too long, so that this framing allows for greater flexibility, both in interpretation and the way that we parlay this knowledge in the classroom. Lisa, did you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of things. I think another way that we wanted the categories to be nimble is that we certainly want them to accommodate current P&D categories that also clearly meet the criteria of any new categories that the Senate passes. So we can imagine that there are some existing P&D courses that will fit one or more of these categories in a really nice way with minimal or very little revision. We also wanted there to be space for existing P&D courses to be revised in ways that faculty, departments, programs see fit for these new categories. And finally, we wanted there to be space for new courses. And by that, I mean either courses that are currently being taught but not falling under P&D, or courses that are not yet being taught, are yet to be proposed, are yet to be dreamed and put into practice by Hunter faculty. So we wanted space for all those things. The other thing I want to highlight here for those of you who were active in this conversation in the fall is some of the changes that you're seeing from the proposal that was shared in the fall. In the fall, you may remember we were talking about 5 possible categories instead of 4. And based on feedback from the community and concerns about the complexity of general education at Hunter more broadly, our subcommittee made a decision to try and integrate those 5 possible categories into 4. Another message that we heard consistently in the fall is that there was some important terminology that was missing from our language, and that absence was actually saying a great deal. And so we hope you see that things like class are playing a much bigger role now. Disabilities, for example, migration. Those are just a few examples, but those are important, I don't want to use the word categories, important language that it was stressed to us needed to be a part of the proposal. Another concern that was raised in the fall was the relationship between US contexts and non-US contexts. And so Les already pointed to that in his remarks, but I hope you'll see that we've tried to clarify that a little bit from the proposal that was shared in the fall. So now you have not only 4 categories, but also explanatory language for what we take each category to mean. And while we're not sharing it as part of today's presentation, it's still in the works. One of the things that we also plan to present to the GER committee, and then pending that eventually to the Senate, is learning outcomes for the categories as well, which will also help, we hope, for faculty and for students to interpret these categories. We want them to be legible, but we also don't want them to be too proscriptive. We want Hunter faculty to feel that within these categories, they have the ability to propose new courses, to innovate, to take these categories maybe in ways that we're not thinking of today. So there's much more that could be said, but I think that's probably enough for now. And I know there's a lot of language on the screen there for you to think about. So let me just say a couple words about next steps. And then after that, I believe we can stop recording and open it up for discussion. So on these slides, which we will share with ACERT and which we will share on the Senate website, you have contact information for me and for Laz. We are always happy to hear from members of the community with your feedback, with your thoughts, which we will then happily take back to the subcommittee. We expect that in March or April, the subcommittee will bring a proposal to the GER committee for a vote. And pending that, we hope that in April or May, the GER committee will bring the proposal to the Senate for a vote. If a proposal passes the Senate, then we, our subcommittee and the other stakeholders we're cooperating with, begin in earnest the work with departments and programs to populate the new categories. And as I said, that can be with existing courses, that can be with revised courses, that can be with new courses. One more thing that I want to say about timing is that, like all aspects of general education, any changes that the Senate approves do not affect students who are already matriculated. Students follow the requirements under which they matriculated. And part of what that means is that there is time for us to continue to do this work together and to populate anything that the Senate passes this semester. It doesn't become the law of the land, the first day of the fall. So we've got time to continue the work together.